Welcome to Matt on Money. This is our third installment. This is a topic that I'm excited to speak about. We actually put a poll out there, so thank you for all of you in social media that did respond and vote on it. But the purpose of today's conversation is we're going to talk about college funding, college planning. We're going to talk about financial aid to some extent. If you have children, whether you just had your first or you have multiple and they're in high school, the decision in terms of college planning, the future costs can be overwhelming, to say the least. I have two children myself, and when I start to look at what it costs right now to go to school, and then I look at historical inflation and what college costs and tuition and room and board have increased to, it can seem very daunting. The numbers can get really, really big. So I think the first thing that you need to do is you need to get an idea of, okay, how long do I have until that future expense? Do I have 18 years? Do I have 8 years? And then you need to understand what the costs are for various different levels of education and different institutions. So if we're looking at community colleges, we have an idea of what those cost. If we're looking at private universities, that's one thing. If we're looking at public schools, obviously there's a different cost associated with that. So we need to lay all of that out and figure out what the current cost is. Then we need to look at how many years we have until that future expense. The expectation all too often is that it's a 4-year expense. It very well may be a 5-year expense. It could be a 6-year expense. So starting with a 4-year expense, if we have a $25,000 current cost, if we use the University of Connecticut as a prime example, as we're in the backyard of the University of Connecticut, and we look at what that cost of $25,000 is likely to be in 18 years or 8 years, it's going to vary drastically, because what we have seen and what we expect to continue is that college costs are going to increase and inflate at a rate that's somewhere between 3 and 5%. So take that $25,000 number, inflate it into the future, and that will give you an idea of what it will cost for 4 years of education, assuming an undergraduate degree. Then you need to back up and say, okay, if we know the expense is going to be X, what is the amount that I would need to commit to some sort of a savings program on a monthly or an annual basis? And you need to supply some sort of a growth factor. So ideally, whatever money we put towards future college is going to grow in some sort of an investment. We also have to determine the type of an investment. Are we going to use a 529 college savings account, which does provide some additional tax benefits? But once we figure out that monthly contribution and we factor in a future growth rate assumption, that will give us an idea of how much we need to save. And again, that amount will differ drastically whether you have a newborn or whether you have someone who has, let's say, 8 years, using my same example for education. So start with those various different variables and put them into a calculator, or reach out to us and we'd be happy to give you an idea of what you need to start with in terms of a contribution. So now we figured out that we need to save for that college educational expense. But now we need to start to think about what is the most efficient vehicle that we could be utilizing. Now, the 529 plan is the most common investment strategy or vehicle that we use to save for future college educational expenses. But you have to look at the state that you live in and ask yourself, do I get a state income tax benefit for utilizing the state-sponsored program? Most of our clients are in the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut actually has two programs. One, a do-it-yourself, if you're comfortable with setting up your own account and managing your own investments. There's one option. If you want to use the advisor-based option, which is done in conjunction with your financial advisor, there's that option. They both work very similarly in terms of the investments that are available and your ability to set up the account with a minimal initial investment and to have an ongoing directly bank draft that comes out of your account. In the state of Connecticut, the amount that you can put into an account per year that is eligible for the state income tax benefit is $5,000 if you're a single taxpayer, and it's $10,000 if you're a married taxpayer. So, not knowing the amount that you need to save per month or per year, the likelihood is that you're going to need to save at least that. Now remember, that is not a per child limit. That is a per household limit. So if you have 3 children and you're married, you can't put 30,000 and get the eligibility for the state income tax benefit, but you could get 10,000. And again, just like other 529 plans, because it is in fact a 529 plan, you get the benefits of the tax deferred growth and then the tax-free withdrawals if those monies are in fact used for qualified educational expenses. There's a very long list of what is deemed to be a qualified educational expense. So you need to kind of make sure that when you are withdrawing funds that they are in fact for a purpose that is going to qualify so that it doesn't trigger a taxable event or something that's subject to a penalty. But start with the state plan that you're in, do some research, find out if there's a state income tax benefit. If you find that there's not, as in other states such as I believe Massachusetts does not have a state income tax benefit, try and find the best plan, and there are resources that are out there that rank these plans. Morningstar is a very good tool, and you'll find many options where you don't have to necessarily be state specific. Okay, so as part of our financial planning process for clients that have children, we are asking the question, do you want your child to go to a public institution? Do you want your child to go to a private institution? Do you want that decision to be left with the child? But as a parent, how much do you want to fund? And I find the answers to be all across the board. Some people will say, well, geez, my parents, fortunately enough, put us in a position where they had all the money set aside for us to go to college. They took out loans. We didn't have any loans, and I want it to be the same for my child. Other people may say, you know what? I had to pay it on my own. Yeah, I'm willing to come up with some money and be a party to the costs of education, but I want my child or my children to have some skin in the game. So you first have to go through that discussion, either yourself if you're a single parent or with your spouse, because that's going to help to drive the amount that you really need to be saving. Because if we anticipate that future educational costs for your child or children are X amount, well, then we need to back into the amount that you want to pay towards that future obligation, and then how much do we need to start saving, and what do we already have earmarked? Because there also could be some money that you have put somewhere that isn't necessarily in a 529 account that may be more better served in a 529 account, using that in conjunction with future ongoing contributions to arrive at a number that we should commit to. But what I all too often hear from clients is, Matt, that's all fine and great, but I want to retire at some date. And how do I juggle saving for college and saving for retirement? Well, the one quote that I have said on numerous occasions is that there are loans for college, but there are no loans for retirement. Not that I'm aware of, at least at this point. So striking a balance between what you save for college and what you save for retirement is delicate. And it really takes a trained eye to go through all the particulars and get a better idea of what your goals are, what's more important. A lot of people prioritize education, and it's a very important investment. But you don't want to do so by compromising your retirement, unless you're willing to make certain decisions that the average person is often not willing to make, such as maybe working a couple of years, maybe not necessarily fully retiring, but partially retiring. So all part of our financial planning process, but it all starts with initial discussion. What are your goals, not only in terms of college funding and planning and what you're going to pay for your children, but also your retirement? Okay, so you have a child in high school. You are getting closer to college. It is on the horizon. And now you're starting to ask yourself, okay, I've got a limited window to make additional contributions. I'm starting to get an idea of what those future costs are. I may have gone through the FAFSA process. I may have filled out some forms at the educational institution to get an idea of what type of aid is available to you. Financial aid is a topic in itself that we could spend countless hours on, and the complexities of the different types of student loans that are out there. Are they government subsidized loans? Are they non-subsidized? Are they quasi-state type organizational loans that are available? Are they private loans? And how do those all work in terms of the interest rate, the repayment schedule? So it can get overwhelming. But what I think you need to do is better understand what those future costs are going to be. So, if for an example you are looking at a private educational institution, you very well could be looking at a price tag of $50,000 to $60,000 a year. With the amount that is going to be made available to you from governmental type loans, minus the amount that you have set aside in college exclusive investment accounts, what is that net amount? And is that an amount that you are in a position to come up with either out of your discretionary income or other investments that you may have made outside? And for a lot of families, it's difficult to try and arrive at what their affordability is. And is that amount going to jeopardize other things such as saving for retirement? So it's a difficult discussion. It's one that we all too often have to have, but we see people that want to send their children to the best possible educational institution, and rightfully so, because it's a great investment, but are they able to afford it? And by them affording it, is it compromising other goals such as retirement? To wrap up, it is never too early to start thinking about future educational costs. With inflation, the current costs of education, and what we have seen over the last 10, 15 years, there is no expectation that we are going to see college costs levelize. Maybe the inflationary factor to go down a little bit from where it's been, but it's really supply and demand driven. And as more and more kids are going to school and it's ultra competitive, we expect to see college costs to continue to increase. So what can we do? Well, let's backtrack. The 529 can be the preferred vehicle to save for college expenses because of the tax benefits associated with it, but you also need to see if you have a home state advantage. Look at the state you live in, find out if there are any sponsored programs that may provide you some tax benefits. Also look at the investments, look at expenses. There's a lot of factors in evaluating a 529 sponsor. That's something that we spend a lot of time and attention. As you start to have your children get closer and closer to going to college, it then becomes a matter of what are those costs, what type of aid is available to you, what type of resources do you have set aside, and are you in a position to be able to afford various different institutions? So we have the community colleges all the way up to private educational institutions, which can be as high as $70,000 a year. There's an incredibly wide range, but sitting down and going through the numbers and determining what you have available, what you're in a position to afford, and making sure that you're balancing all of the various different goals that you have is incredibly important. Then when we get to student loans, there's a lot of information out there, some of it misleading. It's important to sit down with someone who specializes in student loans and college planning. We are fortunate enough to have Kevin Regan in our office, who's a certified student loan advisor. Kevin speaks to educational institutions throughout the Northeast to assist people with student loans and planning for future college education expenses. And then once you get out of school, determining what may be the most appropriate payback plan as you start to pay down on those student loans. So it's best to seek professional advice as always, but this is definitely a niche, and it's an area that we do spend a lot of our time with educating our clients about college planning and student loans and saving for future educational expenses. So we hope you found this helpful. Thanks again. This is Matt on Money. We'll see you next month. Look out for our poll, and you can help us to direct what our topic will be for the month of August.